Alright, what's going on? We're going to talk about the apply method today. The apply method will borrow an object's functions. It's similar to the call method, but we can pass an array in place of extra individual arguments like we do with the call method. So here's an example. Let's create a classroom object and a teacher object. Let classroom, and I'm going to create a function within this classroom object of takeAttendance. Take attendance. And this will be a function, and we will accept a varying amount of students. I will use the rest parameter of students, and I will iterate over our array of students that we pass in. So let's use for let I in students, then I will display each student, console.log students at index of I. Now let's create a teacher object. Let teacher equal, and our teacher will have a name of Mrs.Puff. I think I'm going to change one thing in here. I'm going to display console.log this.name is taking attendance. Okay, so if Mrs. Puff, our teacher, needs to borrow the takeAttendance function, we can use either the call method or the apply method. Let's begin by using the call method, and we can take a look at the differences between the two afterwards. So if I'm going to use the call method, I would type the name of my object that I'm going to borrow this function from, dot, the name of the function I'm going to borrow, takeAttendance, dot call, then pass in the object that is going to use this function, so teacher. Now, if there's any extra arguments that we need to pass in, like a bunch of student names, I will list these as extra individual arguments. So let's pass in a few students as arguments. So we have Spongebob. Then what about Patrick and Sandy? Okay, so this is what this looks like. Mrs. Puff is taking attendance. We have Spongebob, Patrick, and Sandy. Now there's one issue with this. With the call method, we have to pass in extra individual arguments after our object that's going to borrow this function. So what if we need to update the amount of students that we have? Well, we would have to go into our code and then add an extra argument like Squidward is going to join the class late. Squidward. Now, even though this does technically work, it's not practical because it's not flexible. The amount of students in this class is going to fluctuate because students are adding and dropping classes all the time. So every time that there's a change to one of our students, we would have to go into our code and add or remove a student. We have to remove arguments or add arguments based on the situation. So a much more flexible approach, instead of passing all of these extra arguments, we can simply just pass an array. And if there's any changes that we need to make to the array, we can do so, and then just pass in a single argument. So this time, let's use the apply method. So instead of call, we'll use apply, but we need to pass in an array instead of all these extra individual arguments, the names of the students. So let's create an array named students. Let students equal an array, and let's copy all of the students that we have. So place these students within an array. Now, if we need to make any changes to the students that we have within this array, we can do so without changing the amount of arguments that we have. So students.push, and we'll add a student, and we will add Squidward. So students.push Squidward. And now we're going to pass our array as an argument, but then surround these with a set of square brackets. So let's clear the console and run this again. Make sure to remove the rest parameters. And there we go. This works the same as before. However, it's much more flexible because we can update our array of students that we have. So that is the apply method. It will borrow an object's functions. It's similar to the call method, but we pass an array in place of extra individual arguments like we normally do so with the call method. So if you would like a copy of all this code, I will post this to the comment section down below. And well, yeah, that's the apply method in JavaScript.